Hello, and welcome back to my channel. I'm Sarah Edens, a finance coach, author, and wealth mindset researcher, and I'm so glad you chose to join me today for part 2 of my top money lessons that I learned in 2023. Let me know what your lessons were that you learned in the comments below. I would love to have you share that with myself and with our great community here because there's just so many different things that we learn throughout the year, and New Year's is just a really fun time to kind of look back and reflect and see like what went well, what didn't go so well, and start to make some changes so that 2024 is more prosperous for us and we make more good choices with our finances and fewer mistakes. Okay, so my next one here on my little list of money lessons that I learned in 23 is take care of the little problems before they become bigger, more expensive problems. So this kind of gets back to the old saying of a stitch in time saves nine, things like that. Where it's just like if you address something when it's early on, it is often easier, less stressful, way more affordable to deal with than waiting and putting it off. So it's really important to think this through. And this applies to everything you can think of, whether this is your health, so you don't end up with like big, expensive interventions that you have to have done, rather than just doing preventive and routine maintenance for your health and those routine doctors and dentist appointments that none of us enjoy doing. But it's really important to keep up with those each and every year as best you're able. And just being able to kind of keep up with those things, you think about home repairs and home maintenance, often fixing little issues before they get bigger can really, really save you a lot of trouble and a lot of stress. And also too, if you're proactive about your home maintenance, then it can save you having to go and deal with something, for example, when your air conditioner has died in the middle of summer, which ours tend to do. And so if you can get in there and if you have one that's on its last leg, get it replaced early, have that peace of mind. If you're in a hot climate like ours where air conditioning is so important, or if you're in a cold climate where maybe your heater is that important for you, just really good to kind of think through those things and not have you like left stranded and stressed and then end up with a big bill and a lot of emergency expenses around that. Maybe people have to come in and work on the weekends, which always costs extra for home maintenance on the weekends. So it's just something to think through of the sooner you realize there's a problem and proactively address it, the better. I will say this is something I have been really working hard on this year because I used to be a really terrible procrastinator. And so I have just worked so hard this year to really start being more proactive with the problems in my life, because it just honestly is so freeing to do that. And then that way, rather than avoiding them or kind of running away from your problems, you just tackle them, address it, move on. And it's a great way to build self-confidence. I mean, that's even true of your financial issues. If you've got, debt you need to tackle this year, anything like that, just to kind of start whittling away at your credit cards, really start to begin working towards some of those issues. There's nothing like getting that kind of weight off your back by being able to address maybe issues you've been putting off that you kind of know you need to, but you really don't want to. And they don't tend to get better if they're left to themselves. Trust me, I have procrastinated on enough things over the course of my life that I know how stressful it can get and how difficult those problems can kind of morph into the longer they're left sitting on their own and stewing. So that's something to think about, is just address things while they're small before they get bigger. The next one is to forgive yourself for making money mistakes. And I think that this is something that is really important and also really near and dear to my heart, because when I look back at my younger self, when I was just out of college and when I was a newlywed, I made so many money mistakes because I just did not know what I was doing. And now I feel like it's even more challenging because we're living in such challenging times now. Things have just changed so much just in the last couple of years. And while employment is still really great, which is fantastic, the jobs numbers are great, we're just dealing with very high cost of food. We're dealing with high cost of housing, kind of high cost of everything, like we talked about in my previous video that I'll link to down below of part 1 of this video. But it's just a very challenging time to be kind of starting out and learning about money. So if that's you and that's where you are, just really be sure to forgive yourself if you make an expensive mistake and lose some money on whatever it is, or make a purchase that didn't turn out the way you wanted it to. Just know that our mistakes are often our very best teachers. And the key is don't be afraid of making mistakes. But when you make something, you're like, oh yeah, that just did not go the way I wanted it to go. Just sit down, and you might even want to journal about this if you like to write things down, and reflect on, okay, what went badly about that? Like, why didn't that work out the way I wanted it to? What can I learn from this? And how can I change what I'm doing with my money going forward? And that is something that is so critical as a life skill, not just around your money, but everything else you can think of, is be able to not beat yourself up about your mistakes, but be forgiving with yourself and kind to yourself. And then think through what you can learn, because just start thinking about mistakes as your teacher rather than mistakes as your personal failure. For example, that's the way I used to view mistakes. For so many years, I thought that when I made a mistake, I was a failure, I was a bad person, I'd let everyone in my life down, I'd let myself down, and I would just beat myself up so much over mistakes. And I just didn't give myself any grace, any forgiveness, and I didn't realize that you can learn from those and not have to keep making the same mistakes over and over and over again. And so once you realize that mistakes are our teachers, then it's really freeing, because then you're honestly not as scared to try new things. Because if you then try something and you make a mistake, you're like, okay, what can I learn from this? And then you go try something else new and you're like, okay, that didn't go well. What can I learn from this? So it really lowers the barrier to trying new things and being less scared of trying new things. And honestly, trying new things is how we grow as humans. It's how we develop. It's how we grow our wealth. It's how we grow just in every other way. So really important, but definitely, like, especially if this year was really hard for you financially, know, first of all, it was a really hard year for everybody. So just know that. And then also know that, it's okay. And this is a new year, and it's a good time to kind of start over and recalibrate and just look at last year and say, okay, great, water under the bridge. Let's move forward. My next money lesson from 2023 is don't get behind on paying bills and tracking expenses. And I've been trying really hard to practice what I preach on this channel. And so I was really good this year about attempting to keep all my bills paid and all my expenses tracked in my budget spreadsheet, which I will link to the video that I made earlier in the year about how you can budget in Excel completely for free if you have access to Excel. And even if you don't have Excel, you can just print out like a little chart or write out a chart. And it's my basically envelope system of budgeting. It's very simple. It's super straightforward. I'll link to the book that inspired me to do this budgeting method in the first place. But it's pretty much the most efficient and effective budgeting strategy that I've found. So the other thing, though, is once you have a budget in place, you do actually have to start logging expenses. And you can even do this if you like Mint or something like that. These online budget trackers, there's lots of them. So you can always pull one of those up and do it digitally if you want to. But whatever works best for you. But it's just super important to remember to write those expenses down, keep track of what you spent, keep your credit cards paid off. I know that is much easier said than done. I struggled with it all year to keep my credit cards paid off due to higher cost of everything. And so just if you make a habit, honestly, I would recommend, if it's really being troublesome for you with keeping your credit cards paid off, keeping your expenses tracked, just find some time in your day, every single day, where you can log into your bank accounts, go see what's come in, what's come out, all of this, go look at what's on your credit card, and then just start paying things off. And maybe you can't pay your whole credit card off right now, and that's absolutely fine because you are not alone in that scenario. But just really do your best to just keep up with payments rather than just running up huge credit card balances and then making minimum payments and getting killed with credit card interest, which is ridiculously high right now. It's the highest I've ever seen it, ever, that I can remember for sure. But just be able to have that time. For me, it's first thing in the morning after I've worked out. I make my morning coffee. I log into my bank accounts. I'll go see if we had any paychecks come in. I'll go see if we had any charges go through the previous night. And then this year, what I'm doing is I was very, very, very fortunate to be able to just clear the decks on all my credit debt on New Year's Eve. So I went into New Year in 2024 with zero credit debt, which I'm so happy about because that was really my goal, was to just like get that knocked out. And then every morning I just go and pay whatever it is that came across on our credit cards from the day before. And I'm not saying I'm going to be able to do that all year every single day, because sometimes you have big expenses come up that you might have to whittle away at over the course of a couple of months. But just in terms of keeping up with those small things that are part of your budget that might just sit on the card because you forget to get around to it, Personally, I find it incredibly stressful to have to sit down and look at 2 to 3 weeks worth of charges and be like, Amazon, 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 right? And you're like, what on earth was this from Amazon? Then you have to go pull up your Amazon orders and be trying to figure it out. And it can just get messy and stressful and take a lot longer than if you just do it every day. So you might not have time to do it in the morning. If you've got a job that starts like super early in the morning, you might want to do it after work or in the evening before you go to bed or over your lunch break, kind of whatever it takes. But I would highly recommend if you've had trouble keeping on top of things, just make some time every single day and work on that a little bit at a time. And I guarantee you, if nothing else, you'll feel a lot more in control of your finances this year because you'll know exactly where everything's coming and going. Also, it's good if you accidentally get like a fraudulent charge or an incorrect charge from a company, perhaps, to be able to go and immediately fix it rather than have that kind of out there, not knowing about it, and then have to deal with that later. So it's just always a good practice to, especially if you use credit cards a lot, to just really keep an eye on them. And it takes like 2 minutes. You can just pull up your app on your phone, scroll through your charges, pay off as much as you're able to or make payments towards what you're able to, and then move on with the rest of your day or catch it at the end of the day. So that's my best recommendation to you. And what's my plan for this year is it's going to be exercise and meditation, morning coffee, and then go get those bills paid off first thing. And then I'm going to see if I can just keep on a roll for 24 on that one. All right. And then the next money lesson I learned in 23 is don't let stress about money ruin your relationships. And this is definitely something that gave us a lot of trouble early on when we were newlyweds. I imagine most newly married couples probably have stories about this because as you're learning how to combine your lives when you get married, and you're also combining your finances, and that can be full of all kinds of interesting things that come along with that in terms of different people's spending habits, your beliefs about money, the priorities that you have versus the priorities your spouse or your partner has. And so it's really important to remember, especially with how hard the last couple of years have and how much just stress money has caused families across the globe the last couple of years with inflation and higher prices and so forth, the recession in 2020, just really important to remember it is just money. And I know it's easy to say that and be like, well, actually, this is actually ruining my life. And I totally remember what that was like. Like, believe me, I do. It was like so challenging as a newlywed when we were working with a very limited amount of money and in a time where we were coming out of a downturn. We were kind of right in the middle of the 07-08 housing crisis and the big downturn there. So nothing was hiring, so I couldn't get jobs. And so we were living off of my husband's income. And, and it's just so much stress when you're dealing with maybe less income or you can't get hired or your spouse can't get hired. And then it's just really easy to take all that stress and start turning inwards on each other, be like, well, it's your fault, it's your fault. And it's just really important if you've gotten to the point where money has really started to turn into like just a hot button issue every time you try to have a conversation with your spouse or your partner, definitely look at working with a therapist on that, look at working with a financial advisor on that, get some help with being able to have calm conversations and peaceful conversations around money, because there are people out there that's all they do with their coaching and teaching practices is they teach you how to talk about money with your partner, how to manage money together as a family. It's also really helpful too, and I would say the number one thing that we found that was really helpful was to designate one person as the money manager for the family who was going to take care of paying all the bills, making sure everything was taken care of, making sure all the, the mortgage got paid, the rent got paid, really running the budget, and then have the other person obviously have access to all the accounts, know where everything was coming and going from, be able to log in anytime and just kind of see where things were. And then, but just kind of have a designated person, because that's a lot easier than trying to split that and then be like, well, I thought you were going to do that. And be like, well, I thought you were going to pay that. And why didn't that bill get paid? Because we both thought the other person was going to pay it. So within the first couple of years of being married, we realized we needed to just designate one person to do it. I was the person who enjoyed it. So I've been managing the money for our household for a number of years now. And then what we do is we have a monthly family meeting where we will sit down and just go over everything for the month. We'll look through how much we made, how much we spent, if there's any areas we need to work on, if there's any saving or investing priorities that we are working towards, if there's any vacations or trips that we're planning towards, and just be able to have a time when everybody can kind of have input on the process of our family budget. But it's really good to designate one person as the person who takes care of all of that. And it doesn't matter who it is in your family. It can be the husband or the wife or whichever of the partners in your relationship, does not matter. But just being able to kind of have it clear so there's that expectation of, okay, this is your role, you do this, and then we both have access to all the accounts, obviously, and then we have this meeting at the end of the month. I typically do it at the end of the month, so we can look back at the whole month's worth of spending and so forth, and be like, okay, what do we need to do differently going into the next month? Do we have any problem areas, anything we need to troubleshoot? So that's been the thing that's really been great, to just take the stress out of it, because there's way less miscommunication. There's no crossed wires in terms of who was supposed to pay which bill or take care of what. And so that can be really good. And again, I'll link to my video on how to put your budget together in the description below of how to budget in Excel. Because the other thing that is really good to do is kind of have like allowances, if you want to think about it that way, for each member of your family. So you've got yourself, your spouse or partner, your kids, and so forth, and have that kind of as fun money that they can do whatever they want to with, and there's no questions asked, so that everybody has a sense of, this is the family money, this is the fun money, and then the fun money, you can do absolutely whatever brings you joy with that. So again, that helps not to run the budget over on discretionary spending. If one person's a big spender, everybody knows where that expectation is of what that monthly cap is on how much fun money each person in the family has. So those are just some things that work for our family. I'm not saying you have to do any of that if that doesn't appeal to you, but it's just some things that have really worked. But definitely reach out to a financial planner, a marriage and family therapist, people like that, if you're really starting to have huge arguments about money with your spouse. Money is, I think, it's always in the top 10 reasons for divorce. I want to say it's number 7 or 8. So it's not like the top reason that couples get divorced, but it's up there. And just remember not to lose sight of how much you care for each other over something like money, which can absolutely get super stressful, but is fixable, and something that there's a lot of resources out there for you as well to be able to learn how to talk calmly about money. Okay, and then the next one, and the final one, is such a good one. So I was going back through a whole bunch of things. I was doing a bunch of Christmas cleaning before I got my Christmas decorations out. So I like to just go and clean and organize the house before I decorate. So my final tip to you here, and my money lesson that I learned this year, is celebrate how far you've come. So this is something that has just really resonated with me so much. So I was going back through all of these things in the closets and just pulling stuff out, and I ran across some old journals that I kept back when I was in my 20s, and I was going through the lowest point in my life, where I had I had a terrible job. I was having some really substantial relationship problems, and money was such a stressor for me. Money was like the number one thing that I was so stressed out about. And it's amazing how when time goes by and things get better, that you are like, oh, of course everything's always been fine, and you kind of forget the hard times, which is probably for the best, or at least that's the way I am. I definitely tend to focus on the positive, so I kind of like forget how bad things have been in the past. But it was really interesting to look back at this journal, because it was just me there going, oh my gosh, I've got so much credit card debt. I can't figure out how I'm going to pay it all off. I'm making no money on my job. And this job was like the job from hell, okay? It was a just dreadful job. I was working in a call center. I was working 6 days a week, really consistently, 8-hour days. And they'd often turn into 9-hour days, because they would force us to work at our desks over lunch. They would like bring us these like cold, yucky Arby's sandwiches on these little trolleys, and like bring them around and be like, oh, you're getting lunch break, but just keep working, but we'll feed you Arby's, but keep working. And so I just remember like everybody was like competing over the overtime on the weekends just to try to make ends meet. And I was looking back at my journal, and I was like, wow, I forgot how hard that time in my life was. And I'm so glad I'm not there anymore as well. In that phase where things were so hard, and I was just so stressed out about money and so worried about money, and it was just really consuming and just truly not knowing how I was going to get from month to month, I would run into the situation where I would just run out of money at the end of the month if I wasn't like super, super careful, because I wasn't great at budgeting back then. And I would just run out of money at the end of the month. And I just remember one night I got home from work, it was at the end of the month, I'd run out of money, and there was like one can of chicken soup left in the pantry. And obviously, at the time, I was terrible at reaching out for help. I could have called any number of my family and friends and told them about how bad the situation was. I could have reached out to a food pantry or a food bank. I could have reached out to places of worship in my local community. I mean, I did not have to have this be this hard, let's put it that way, but I'm terrible. I'm terrible at asking for help. I've gotten better over the years, but I'm a very stubborn person. I like to do things myself. And I was also ashamed to admit that I was having such bad financial problems and that my life had just gotten so sucky. Honestly, I was really embarrassed. And so I did not want to talk about it with anybody. And so anyway, long story short, I got home from a really long day at work, and there was like this one can of chicken noodle soup in the pantry. And I was like, okay, fine, I guess that's dinner. And so I went and heated it up, put it in a bowl and put it on the table, and turned around to do something in the kitchen. And my little puppy, who was like teeny tiny and very jumpy at the time, jumped up onto my chair and got up on the table and ate my soup. And I just remember I couldn't stay mad at her because she was so cute, and like I love my dogs, so I would definitely like give them my food before I would, let them go hungry, because they had food, don't worry. But I just remember being just like in tears that my dog had eaten my soup, and that was the last can of soup I had until the next paycheck, and just going to bed hungry. And if you've ever gone to bed hungry, you know how much it gets your attention, because you are like so aware of, how stressful money can get. You hear people all the time that are clearly in a position where they're not stressed about money and they've never had money stress. And they're like, oh, money isn't everything. And I am here to tell you, when you are struggling, when you are stressed, if you have tons of money, of debt, and a very low paying job, money suddenly is everything, in the sense that it's all you can think about, either how to spend less or how to make more, and how to get your needs met for yourself and your family. It really is, because it's like, that's your ability to have a roof over your head. That's your ability to eat. That's your ability to survive. And so I never really understand why people say, like money isn't everything, because it's like, well, actually, when you don't have enough, it actually kind of becomes like the whole focus of your world of how to get more. And so that's what we're here on this channel to talk about, is like, how do we unlock our inner millionaires? How do we grow our wealth? How do we get to be financially successful and financially independent, so that none of you are worried ever in the future? That's my definite, genuine hope, is by what I teach here, that you'll be able to never have a day when you're having one can of chicken soup in the pantry or nothing to eat, where you're not sure how to pay the bills, but that you're able to kind of learn from both my channel and other channels as well, but start to learn the skills that you need to know that you can always take care of yourself and your family, because that is such a skill that I wish they taught more in school. I wish that they would focus less on teaching to the test and more about teaching life skills, like learning from your mistakes and how to make money and how to budget and, how to support yourself and take care of yourself as a grown-up. So that was just a story that came to mind as I was going through these old journals, and I was like, wow, like I'm so thankful. And then after that, thank goodness, like things really did start to improve, and that's another story for another day. So that wasn't a very long phase of my life. But if you've been there, not only how stressful it is, but honestly how humiliating it is and how hard it is to reach out for help. So also, if you're in a low point in your life, I do want to really encourage you to reach out for help. Reach out to your local place of worship. Reach out to family and friends. Reach out to your food pantry or your food bank. Don't suffer through a difficult time alone. I know lots of people have fallen on hard times over the past couple of years, so there's no shame in it at all. But having been a very stubborn, proud person who's been in that position before, where I just don't want to ask for help, I don't want to admit that I'm having problems, it just can be really hard sometimes. But just remember that other people want to help you, and they won't look down on you for having trouble or for making mistakes. Other people really do want to be able to help you, and that makes their day to be able to help you. And so I hope that that's something that's helpful for you as well, because I was like, looking back at this situation, I was like, why didn't I go to the food bank? Like, what was I thinking? Why didn't I call my family and explain how bad the situation was. Like, why didn't I reach out for more help? And I'm sure if it had gone on longer, I probably would have done. But who knows? I probably, knowing me, I probably would have done it the hard way. So I don't want you to do it the hard way. So anyway, that wraps up my top 10 money lessons for 2023. Let me know in the comments what money lessons you learned during this year, and share those as well with our community. And remember, we have a safe comment section here on my YouTube channel. So you will never be trolled or spammed or anything in my comments section. I hold all my comments for review, which means that I see them first before they go live. And if they're hurtful, unkind, unprofessional, hateful, trolls, spam, and so forth, they don't ever see the light of day. And so only the comments that are helpful and instructive and collaborative and uplifting are going to be able to be seen on my channel. So just know that you are perfectly safe commenting in this space, because I'm making sure that you are. And thank you so much for watching, and I will see you again soon in my next video.